Coming up on this week's episode of TechSNAP, how Groupon made the switch to FreeBSD and why researchers extract keys from a hardware module, and Intel's got some CPU-backed malware protection. Then it's feedback and a rockin' roundup on this week's episode of TechSNAP. Hi everyone, and welcome to TechSNAP. This is episode 232 of Jupiter Broadcasting's weekly systems network and administration podcast. We stream this episode live on September 3rd, 2015. This episode is brought to you by our three fine sponsors, Ting, DigitalOcean, and IX Systems. I'll tell you more about those great sponsors as this here show goes on. Oh, our live stream? Why, that's powered by the incredible Scale Engine over at scaleengine.com. Go check that out. My name is Chris, and joining us every single week is our host, the admin, the tech, and the teacher, Mr. Alan Jude. Hey there, Alan.
Hello, Chris, everybody. Thanks for watching.
Hello, sir. I am looking forward to today's episode. We're going to get into it. I'll explain why a little bit, but I thought we should probably start with our top story this week. Because, Alan, I happen to know that as long as I have my keys stored away in a hardware device, I am never going to be vulnerable because I make sure my physical security is top-notch. So, Alan, what is our first story this week?
Researchers have managed to extract the private keys that were stored in the Gemalto SafeNet Luna HSM, or Hardware Security Module.
Ah, dang it.
And this is the attack allows remote authenticated users to bypass intended key export restrictions by leveraging the crypto user or crypto officer access to the HSM device. So an HSM, or Hardware Security Module, is basically a dedicated device, usually either like a PCI card or a completely separate appliance, that's used to safely store private encryption keys, either for symmetric or asymmetric encryption. And they usually have some kind of crypto processing built into them as well. So the general idea is, rather than the encryption keys for your business or whatever just sitting on your computer where someone could steal them or use them or whatever, they're stored in this separate device that has very strict access control. And if you want to say it's your root certificate for Active Directory or something. If you want to sign something with that certificate, you basically feed the certificate into the HSM, it signs it with the private key and then gives you back the result, and you never had access to the private key the whole time. Right? So that is the way they're supposed to work, is basically by preventing anyone except for the security officer from having access to the private key, but still letting people use the key for things, just without ever actually being able to touch the key. The idea is that the user never has to have access to the keys, and this, all certificate authorities that do like SSL all use these devices. Not necessarily this particular one that has the vulnerability, but an HSM specifically designed for dealing with this. Yeah. So that we don't have to have a whole bunch of people that work at these certificate authorities that have access to the private keys, which are like securing the whole internet, right?
Right. Yep. Makes sense.
You have one government spy, and they can do whatever they want.
Yep.
And so this way, if someone that broke in, the worst they could do is sign a certificate, which we could then later revoke. Whereas if they got access to the actual crypto key, they could do whatever they want, and we wouldn't know. HSMs may also possess controls that provide tamper evidence, such as logging and alerting. So they automatically log every time a certificate gets signed, or alert if too many certificates get signed in too short a time or something. And they're also tamper resistant. Some of them will go so far as to delete their keys if they detect somebody trying to tamper with the device. So if you're trying to break in and steal the cryptographic keys, they'll actually just erase them and lose them, or have to be restored from a backup, rather than the potential that they get leaked. But these researchers have found a flaw in these particular HSM devices.
Surprise.
So in order to make these devices semi-standard, they follow a specification called PKCS number 11, which is a very complex standard with dozens of different APIs and a wide range of cryptographic operations, which they call mechanisms, for everything from encrypting to random number generation and key derivation and all that kind of stuff. The SafeNet vulnerability involves the key derivation mechanisms. These are used to create a cryptographic key as a function of another key. So basically, you take an encryption key, do something to it, and use that as the key for the next thing. Okay. And in a strong key derivation algorithm, the idea is that even if somebody breaks that second level key, they can't use that to then figure out what the first level key was. Okay. So, this is how all those password encryption things we talk about use, right? It's basically you're going to take the original password and then hash it and mix stuff in. And from the end thing, you can never tell what the original password is.
Mm-hmm.
And they also have a Bitcoin example even. For example, the BIP-32 for Bitcoin proposes the notation of a hierarchical deterministic wallets, where a family of Bitcoin addresses are derived from a single seed secret. Designed properly, key derivation provides such an amplification effect, where you can take one secret key and make a whole bunch of keys out of it.
Okay.
And if it's designed properly, then even if the derived key is compromised, even if somebody manages to get the second level key, the damage is limited to that key. They can't use that information and then figure out what the original key was. Right? They can't work their way backwards to the seed. However, if it's designed improperly, the derived key has a simple relationship to the original secret and leaks information about it, which is the problem. Right? And this is what's called related key cryptanalysis. It's a very specific branch of these types of attacks, and basically, because we know how certain things are done, we can figure out, all right, so we have this key and we know this is the operation that was done to get from the original key and work backwards. That's not supposed to be possible, but when people make mistakes, that's going to be. As it turns out, with the SafeNet HSMs, we don't have to dig very deep into cryptanalysis results to actually find out what's going on. There are two mechanisms that are very easy to exploit and work generally against a wide class of different algorithms. The first one is extract key from key. And basically what that does is, an AES 256 key is 32 bytes long, right? Because 32 bytes is 256 bits. Well, if you use extract key from key, you basically just pick a certain subset of that key and use that as the next key. Like I'm going to take the middle 4 bytes of that key and use that as the next key. So not a very good way to do it. But
Yeah.
And then the second one is XOR base and data, which basically involves taking the original encryption key, some other data, and mixing them together with the exclusive OR command, which, if done twice, results back in the original information. So extract key from key is defined in section 6.27.7 of the PKCS number 11 standard, version 2.30. But it may as well be renamed the extract substring, because it's literally just grabbing some part of the original key with no modification at all. It's the standard substring thing you could do with strings in any programming language. This derivation scheme creates a new key by taking a contiguous sequence of bits at desired offset and length from the original key. So if you have access to the HSM, you can create a new key in the HSM that's just some subpart of the original secret key. Right? So the HSM doesn't let you get the original key, but allow you to create a new key that's just some part of the original key. In the example they use in this article, they said, all right, give me a new key of AES key number 47 or whatever, that is the first 2 bytes. Start at the beginning and give me 2 bytes. So this will give us the first 2 bytes of the original AES key and make a new key out of it. And that gets saved as like key number 600 and something on the HSM. They then used the SHA-256 HMAC algorithm to encrypt a plain text that they chose with this new key, which is only 2 bytes long. And so that's only 16-bit encryption. That's not very strong, right? And so they just took the HMAC, knew what the protocol was, and just brute forced it until they got back those original 2 bytes.
Okay.
And now they know what the first 2 bytes of the original AES key are. Well, repeat that for the, 3rd and 4th byte, and the 5th and 6th byte, and so on. And after 16 rounds of doing this, you have all 32 bytes of the AES 256 key. Now, the AES 256 key, if you take the entire thing, is actually really hard to crack. But when you take it and use part of it in a SHA-256 HMAC that's not meant to be dealt with the same way, all of a sudden a fraction of that key becomes really easy to do. Because you're doing chosen plain text and a lot fewer things are happening, right? AES 256 HMAC isn't meant to be done with a short key like that. So this is surprisingly, this works not only against symmetric keys like AES, but even generic H-match secrets work against elliptic curve private keys like RSA, plain DSA, or Diffie-Hellman. Were like RSA, but DSA and Diffie-Hellman were not affected. Sorry.
Okay.
But this is just an implementation quirk. These mechanisms are typically intended for symmetric keys only. For elliptic curve keys, the byte arrays being truncated is the secret scalar part of the key, right? For example, the secret component of a Bitcoin elliptic curve DSA key is a discrete logarithm of, SECP 256K1, which is a specific curve. Initially, that discrete logarithm is just stored as a 32-byte value of letters or whatever, right? And the extract key from key can be used to successfully reveal chunks of that at a time until you have the whole thing, right? So, if you have access to this HSM, you can actually slowly exfiltrate, well, not that slowly, exfiltrate the entire key of AES keys or even RSA and elliptic curve keys.
Wow.
And that's only with the extract key from key method. Now, if you do the XOR base and data method, it suffers a very similar problem. This operation derives a new key by XORing user-chosen data with the original secret key. While there are cryptographic attacks exploiting that against specific algorithms like triple DES, a design choice made by SafeNet leads to simpler key recovery attacks that work identically against any algorithm. When the size of data is less than the size of the key, the result is truncated to the data size. So if I just inject a small amount of data and ask it to XOR it with the secret of this AES-256 key, it only gives me the first couple bytes, or however long my initial data was. So that makes it, I can do a little bit at a time in order to brute force smaller chunks. Say, XORing 256-bit AES keys with 1 byte data results in a 1 byte output. That provides another avenue for recovering a key incrementally. We derive a new HMAC key by XORing with successively longer sequences of 0 bytes. Because if you XOR with 0, you get back the original key. With only the last segment of a new key left to brute force with each step as we keep going. And so that's how you can get the keys out. So regardless of which mode of authentication you use to log into the HSM, there's both physical ones and they now have a cloud one where it's only like a username and password, which is probably worse. Yeah. So regardless of how you log into the device, the client must have a logged in session with the HSM to use any of the existing keys, right? So in that case, it is enough then that an attacker who compromises any client machine that has access to the HSM is then able to extract the keys. That might sound like a high barrier or even, tautological. Right? If your machine is compromised, then your keys are also compromised, right? That's how it's always been. But protecting against that outcome is precisely the reason you have a cryptographic HSM in the first place, right? The whole point of an HSM is so that if that computer gets infected and somebody takes it over, all they can do is sign a couple of keys that we can revoke later because we have a log of everything they did. They're not supposed to be able to get the secret key out of that and then go do whatever they want offline without any logs, right? We offload key management to special purpose tamper-resistant HSMs because we do not trust our regular off-the-shelf PCs to sufficiently resist these attacks. The assumption is that even if the plain PC were compromised, attackers only have a limited window of using the HSM keys, and only as long as they retain persistence on the box that they've exploited, and that risks them getting detected the longer they stay, right? Specifically, they cannot exfiltrate keys to continue using them after their access has been cut off. But if they can extract the key, then you've defeated the whole point of having the HSM in the first place.
Yeah.
That property both limits damage and gives defenders time to detect and respond, right? If all they can do is use the key, not actually steal the key, then with your audit logs, you'll be able to know exactly what certificates they issued and just revoke them and clean up, and it's no big deal. But if they can steal the key, then that's the whole ball game. A key extraction vulnerability such as this breaks everything. With a vulnerable HSM, temporary control over a client or just their HSM credentials, if it's like the cloud one, allows permanent access to the key outside the HSM.
Wow.
In particular, this vulnerability applies to all symmetric keys along with elliptic curve private keys. There's one additional criteria required for exploitation, though. The key you're trying to extract the private key from must permit key derivation operations. So when you load a key into the HSM, the PKCS11 standard defines a set of Boolean attributes associated with stored objects that describe what you're allowed to do with them.
Okay.
In particular, there's CKA_derive that determines whether a key can be used for derivation, and a meta attribute CKA_modifiable that determines whether the other attributes, like derive, can be turned on and off, or if they're fixed. Accordingly, an object that has the CKA derive true or CKA modifiable true, which then allows them to change CKA derive, allows arbitrarily, anything that has this derive flag set or the modifiable flag set so you can turn derive on is vulnerable. In particular, a bunch of the, when you ask the HSM to generate you a key, a bunch of them just turn all the flags on by default so that the key can do whatever you want it to do. Whereas normally you don't want that, right?
Right, to make it flexible, I suppose.
Yeah, it's like if you're generating a key for doing Bitcoin or whatever, it only should have this one permission and none of the other ones.
Yeah.
It shouldn't have derive. But if it does have, then somebody can extract the key. Luckily, they say the latest firmware update from SafeNet addresses the vulnerability by removing the weak key derivation schemes, like the extract key from key. This is the most cautious approach. It's definitely preferable over incrementally tweaks such as attempting to set minimum key lengths, because those wouldn't be very effective because you could just do it with a longer key. It would take longer, but you could still do it. So instead, they basically removed the idea of, I'm going to make a key by just taking some bits from this other key, because that's actually horrible. You shouldn't do that, right? If you want to derive a key from a key, you should use a key derivation function. We have a bunch of really strong ones like scrypt and so on. What's the other one, like PKDF or something like that? I forget what it's called.
Yeah,
anyway.
I know what you mean, though.
Yep. Anyway, it's very interesting research, and they have a very, very detailed blog post broken up into 2 giant posts. If you're interested in this at all, you should definitely check it out.
It's very nice. Wow, that's a big deal.
Yep.
That's a huge thing to break down, too. You've done a good job of actually listening to all that.
That required a lot of reading.
Yeah.
And sorry, some of it was just trying to read back all of that.
It is a massive, but it's a lot of research to break down into digestible form, and it is broken out in notes in the show notes.
Right. I remember when we talked, what was it? I think Start SSL, the Israeli certificate authority, actually got hacked at one point, but because of their HSM, everything was fine.
Right. I remember that
it just goes to show that, we have to. This is exactly the place where things like that Zero Trust initiative that we talked about last week.
Yeah.
Where if I'm going to use your HSM, I want the source code so I can make sure the HSM I'm running, I can audit it and make sure it does what it says it does and doesn't have any obvious bugs.
Naturally.
But also I want to be sure that what you're telling me it does is actually what it does.
Yeah. Yeah. Or what you think it does is actually what it does. Yeah.
Exactly.
All right, Alan, I'll tell you about something that does what they say they do. That's IX Systems. Head over to ixsystems.com/TechSNAP, and there you'll find the ultimate guide to buying a new server for open source. I love this because if you've got a workload that's really important and you want to make sure that you're not going to have the hardware guys pointing fingers at the software guys, software pointing fingers at the hardware guys, and everybody putting their hands up in the air, go to ixsystems.com/TechSNAP and cut through all of that. End it. ixsystems.com/TechSNAP. And Alan, IX Systems has, I like to always talk about the folks that work there because I think that's part of their secret recipe, but we have a chance for people to actually meet them. One of the reasons we're pre-recording this week is because you're actually right now, are you right now at VBSDCon? Just about, right?
Looking at the day. Yes. No, sorry. This episode is the week after.
Okay, just got back. Okay.
It was last week.
So VBSDCon going on September 11th through the 13th, and just like so many, they were just at VMware World. They're at the cons before that.
They'll be at 2 weeks from this episode, they'll be at EuroBSDCon in Sweden.
So go over to IX Systems, take a look at them, go to our landing page if you would, so that way we get credit at ixsystems.com/TechSNAP. See why they have systems that are built around open source technology, and they can really build anything for you, whatever the software solution is.
That's the big thing is, when you contact them, you don't be like, oh, I want this processor or whatever. It's like, all right, I need to build a machine that's going to be able to manage at least this many IOPS for my virtual machines. I have this many virtual machines, and I'm going to make sure each one can do at least this many IOPS. Right? It's like, sure, I have a benchmark that shows this machine can do this many, but in a worst case, it needs to be able to do this level of performance.
Yep.
And that's where the difference is.
I love it.
Is that, it's not about what you can get under ideal conditions. It's what you're going to be able to guaranteed to get all the time. Because if it goes lower than that, then your virtual machines aren't fast enough and everything grinds to a halt.
Check them out, ixsystems.com/TechSNAP, and say hi to them when you're at an event. So, Alan, this next story, what's this about Groupon and FreeBSD? A match made in heaven, perhaps? Infrastructure?
Kind of.
Tell me about it.
So I didn't cover this story just because it's all about FreeBSD.
Disclaimer.
It's more because it actually gets into what it takes to actually make a transition at a big company.
To
So
a
if you have
different
company-
system?
Yeah. So
Okay.
there's like, currently we have all Linux, and turns out we want FreeBSD for this thing.
All right.
How are we going to manage to convince all of our Linux employees to learn about FreeBSD and not just freak out?
Yeah,
and
right.
so on?
Okay. Yeah, interesting.
So this is an article from the FreeBSD journal. They made this particular article out of this latest edition available for free on the website.
Cool.
So if you don't have a subscription, you could still read it and see how great it is and then go buy a subscription.
That's a good idea.
But anyway, so it talks about Groupon and how they switched to FreeBSD and why. One of the biggest things was they were moving away from using basically Fusion IO or Flash on PCI Express type cards to using SSDs for their database. But SSDs turn out to have a fairly significant bit error rate, right? Where every so often one of the bits is going to get flipped and you're going to get invalid data back. Well, in your e-commerce database, that's a big deal.
Yeah.
Because a flip bit could change the price of something at Groupon and make it way low. And then, the advertiser that paid you to set up all these coupons all of a sudden is, out thousands of dollars or huge amounts of money. Or it makes it too high and all of a sudden this thing's expensive and it doesn't work. Or, it decides that user is now an employee. All right. And, one bit can make a big difference.
Wow.
Right? So then they're like, well, it seems like the only real solution to that is ZFS. Because ZFS means that we'll have a checksum, and if the data comes back wrong, we'll correct it from our
So they were on
mirrors or
Linux
whatever.
with, we don't know what file system beforehand, but probably one of the pathetic file systems that Linux has.
Yeah. And they just they looked at a couple things. Obviously, dtrace was a big one too for being able to figure out what was going on and why. And also just being able to roll a custom kernel very quickly and being able to use Poudriere to make their own sets of packages with their own settings very quickly meant that especially they made these changes like right before Heartbleed, and then when there was like this rash of OpenSSL vulnerabilities, and each time they had to fix deploy on their entire architecture within 45 minutes.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Yikes. That's significant.
Yeah. Anyway, so Sean Chittenden is architect at Groupon, and he wrote the article for the FreeBSD journal, and he kind of tells a story about how they dealt with switching, and a little bit about why as well. As it turns out, if your organization is already supporting more than one flavor of Linux, right, where you're already dealing with, the package manager is a little bit different, or, this config file's in a different place. Once you've already done that, adding FreeBSD as well is really not any more work than just any other distro, right? Mm-hmm. There are differences, and they're not all the same differences, but it's really the same amount of work as supporting, a Ubuntu and Red Hat at the same time. And of course, FreeBSD brought with it, ZFS, dtrace, better firewalls, Poudriere, package manager, more bundled build system, and so on. But, to say, now one of the biggest items that no one misses and no one ever talks about anymore, imagine having to run FSCK on a near-line backup server with 288 terabytes of storage in it.
Right, yeah.
It would literally take like weeks for the FSCK after a hard reboot or something. Mm-hmm. Whereas with ZFS, it's just like, nope, back online, done. But say, one of the challenges of organizational change is the personal anxiety from either learning something new or trusting something new in production. Okay. Right? So they had all these Linux sysadmins, and they're like, well, we don't know about BSD. And, that's scary or whatever. And, I feel like I might make a mistake, or that I won't be able to relax at night because I'll have to make sure, I'll have to read documentation on it to figure out what's going on. But also, yes, learning to trust it in production when you're doing something new. At first, ZFS seems really scary, and then you start using it, and then you sleep at night, and then you're like, oh, I understand now.
It also recommends doing benchmarks and other high-glitz testings to prove systems are not fragile. That's a good idea, too.
Yes. Yeah, and it helps convince management when all of a sudden, we need like 30% fewer machines now because of ZFS or whatever. But the way they dealt with this for like database administrators, they did a bunch of like 30-minute video group chat sessions where they kind of just ease the database team into the different aspects of FreeBSD.
Yeah.
And obviously, using FreeBSD over going to something Solaris-like a Lumos to get ZFS meant that top was still top, as opposed to on Solaris, it's like PR stat. But then when you can show people stuff on FreeBSD like top minus MIO, which shows you top, but it's ranking the applications by how much IO they're doing, and you can like sort by read or write or whatever, and you can be like, oh, all that write bandwidth to the disk is coming from over here.
That's nice.
Or this application or whatever.
That's key. That's a key information piece.
Yeah. And then GStat for actually being able to break out the IOPS and megabytes per second going to each disk, or even partition and so on. Yeah. But just a bunch of these 30-minute things that mostly actually consist of a short demonstration followed by Q&A to let people ask their questions and get their anxieties out of the way. Then they filled in the missing bits by hiring external trainers like Drew Levine to come in for a week and just give all their Linux sysadmins a crash course on these are the things you need to know to be able to walk around FreeBSD, right? Here's how to install a package and how to do something from ports and how to customize this and how to figure out what's going on over here and over there and so on. But anyway, if you read the article, the PDF there, it has good coverage on the steps you have to go through to actually make a technical change like this stick, from both, convincing management to let you try it, convincing the other tech team to adopt it into that it's actually worth doing, and getting all the buy-in that you need across the organization, and just getting people over the fear of the change and onto the excitement of all the new tools they have now.
The things to look forward to.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have done a lot of transitions, from DOS to Windows, and on the server side from Windows to Linux. And I did do a Linux to BSD, and that was, out of all of the transitions I've ever done, the easiest. And I think the big reason is because you can have bash on both, but also because the Unix file permissions are the same.
It's the same.
And when you're moving large data sets between like DOS and Windows and Linux, like you always lose that, and you end up having to script something to go through and reset all the permissions and ownership. But under FreeBSD and Linux, my group IDs and user IDs mapped up, and I just rsync the data over and never had to touch a thing. And that was an easy transition, let me tell you. So as a file server, it worked out great. All right, Alan, any other thoughts on that story?
And there's a video linked at the bottom there from the Bay Area LISA, or Large System Administrators Group. So it's like a user group, but for not a specific operating system, but just anybody that deals with any large systems.
Okay.
And Sean gave a talk version kind of this article there about it as well.
Nice, Alan. Very cool. I'll watch that video. I saw it linked in the show notes. I played just one or two bits.
Yeah, I saw you show a little bit of it.
All right, Mr. Jew, well then let me tell you about our friends over at DigitalOcean. Head over to DigitalOcean.com and use our promo code SNAPOcean to support the TechSNAP program. DigitalOcean is my go-to Linux infrastructure on demand. They have the very intuitive way to spin up a server, and you're not going to believe how fast you can get started. Less than 55 seconds, and the pricing plans start at only $5 a month. For $5, you'll get 512 megabytes of RAM, a 20 gigabyte SSD, 1 CPU, and a terabyte of transfer. And then they just very easily step up. Like the next rig's $10 a month, and you just double all that stuff. Like you get 30 gigabyte SSD, 2 gigabyte of transfer, 1 gigabyte of RAM. Like it's just boom, it just steps. Everything steps up. Same like in the next price point, $20, everything steps up again. It's just very easy, very straightforward, and they have hourly pricing available. And they have data center locations in New York, San Francisco, Singapore, Amsterdam, and London, so you can place them around. And they have a really, really brand new one in Germany with 40 gigabit E connections to each hypervisor. Their fastest SSDs yet, and has a great position to get good good distribution. And they wrap all of it up with a classy interface. I mean, this is the classiest interface out there. Very well done, very simple and intuitive, but extremely powerful, with an API that takes it even further and really brings it up to the next level. Go over to DigitalOcean and try the promo code SNAPOcean. You plug that sucker in there and try it out for a little bit and see what we've been talking about. One of the things I love about DigitalOcean is they went big on SSDs very early on. They have a very straightforward platform that makes a lot of sense, easy to one-click deploy applications, a bunch of really great open source utilities. Private networking is available between your droplets that don't count against your transfer rate. You can move your images around if you decide a better spot would be better, or to even a different person. And their API is frequently updated. It looks really good. And some droplets even have IPv6 support. Pretty cool in the TechSNAP audience. So go over to DigitalOcean.com and use the promo code SNAPOcean. And don't forget, they're willing to pay authors, too, for writing really good technical write-ups. So something else to consider. You can look over on their community page for more information about that. DigitalOcean.com and use the promo code SNAPOcean. Dun, dun, dun.
The biggest thing for me is that each VM actually has a gigabit internet connection instead of only 100 megabits like you get elsewhere.
Yeah, buddy. Talk about that. That's great. I know.
Yeah.
Alan, so normally this would be a point where I'd mention the BSD program, but I guess...
You aren't able to see into the future?
No, I'm not. I know. We have a checkpoint story we could get to, though. You ready to jump over to the checkpoint story? All right. So the checkpoint Sandblast Sandbox. Sandblast Sandbox spells rest in peace for ROP attacks. Hold on. Let me just look at this, Alan. The checkpoint Sandblast Sandbox spells RIP for ROP attacks. Only a Network World headline. I mean, that's a lot of acronym, but tell me what this is.
Yeah. So Checkpoint has the sandboxing software, and they're extending it by using a feature available on the Haswell CPUs and above that Intel makes now.
Okay.
So the new software monitors CPU activity, looking for anomalies that indicate that attackers are using sophisticated methods that would go unnoticed with traditional sandboxing techniques. ROP, or return-oriented programming, is basically a way to get around things like ASLR that would normally, and DEP that would protect your machine from like buffer overflows and stuff. So traditional sandboxes, including Checkpoint's, the one that they've had before now, determine whether files are legitimate by opening them in a virtual environment to see what they do, and if they do something bad, then it won't let you run the file. To get past the sandboxes, attackers have started devising evasion techniques, such as when you run the infected file or whatever, it just does nothing for the first hour or something. Or it sets up so it drops a little marker and then doesn't do anything until you've rebooted once, so that the sandbox won't notice what it's doing. But what Sandblast does is sorts the evasion technique called ROP, or return-oriented programming, which basically enables malicious executable code on top of data files, despite things like data execution prevention. So normally, if there's some code stored in the data part of a file, data execution prevention, or NX, the CPU feature from Intel, will prevent that anything that marked as data can't be run as code.
Okay.
Right. So chunks of memory are written down as either code or as data, and you can't run data to prevent this kind of flaw. Data execution prevention is a widespread operating system feature that blocks you from executing that.
Okay.
ROP does this by grabbing legitimate pieces of code called gadgets and running them to force the file to create a new memory page somewhere where it can then inject its malicious shell code that can be uploaded and then gain execution. So basically, it uses little bits of other programs that are around to cause a new chunk of memory to get set up and be marked for execution, and then load the code into that. This process has the CPU responding to calls that return to addresses different from where they started. So normally, a program will be running over here in memory, and then it'll jump way over here to use some gadget from somewhere else, and then it'll actually send it back up over here. So the Sandblast thing detects that now by using the debugging features that are built into the Haswell CPU architecture.
Cool.
So Sandblast has a CPU-level detection engine that picks up on this anomaly and blocks the activity. The engine is available either on an appliance that you can put in your own data center, or as a cloud service which runs on the Checkpoint cloud. And then, of course, their appliances have to be, you have to have a new enough appliance that has the Haswell CPU to be able to use this feature.
Yes.
So if you have an existing appliance, you might have to upgrade it.
Yeah.
It says, or you can just use the cloud one in order to avoid paying for any appliance. Anyway, it's interesting to see this new processor feature being used to detect attacks. But I also wonder if it could be used in other ways, right? If it can monitor how the things are jumping around in the processor, could does that provide some kind of side channel where I could detect when somebody's encrypting something, or maybe even leak parts of the key and so on, right? Like we've seen that you can do that between VMs on a box. Well, if the CPU is letting you get into a debug thing, I wonder if it can be used for malicious things as well.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe that'll be a story in a couple of months.
Yep. Separately, Checkpoint is also introducing a new feature called threat extraction, which makes it safe to open documents quickly before they've been run through the sandbox. Basically, it can convert Word documents into PDF files, or convert existing PDFs into PDF files. And basically what it does is it cleanses out over-featured file formats. So it removes macros and stuff from Word documents. It removes embedded JavaScript from PDFs. And basically it just dumbs it down to just a plain PDF with nothing else in it.
Yeah, safe.
Yeah, so that while you're waiting for that Word document you just got sent to be run through the sandbox and make sure it doesn't do anything bad, you can get a PDF where you can actually just look at a picture of it. I was wondering if you could just do it as a JPEG even.
Yeah, take a shot of it and then...
But obviously, a PDF scales better for large, like a multi-page Word document, as a JPEG would just be horrible. But yeah, basically, they have a way to sanitize these files down to like a lowest common feature, which I think makes a lot of sense. It's something we should have. But anyway, there's more details about it in the story if you're interested. But it's definitely interesting to see the CPU being used to kind of basically go around the operating system to detect some kinds of attacks.
Yeah, really. And also makes it operating system agnostic, obviously, as well, which is neat. Alan, any other thoughts on that?
Nope, that's it for that one.
Those CPUs are getting more and more sophisticated. It's pretty neat. I'll tell you about Ting. Go to Ting right now. Won't you? And check them out. TechSNAP.ting.com, sponsor of the TechSNAP program, my mobile service provider for well over 2 years now. And I'll tell you why. I only pay for what I use, and because I'm Wi-Fi savvy, that means I pay a ridiculously low amount. I mean, it's ridiculous. I have like 3 lines, and often my bill doesn't crack $35. It's unbelievable. It's, I think right now, I think this week, I checked it earlier this week, I think it was like around $37. It's incredible. It's only $6 for the line plus local taxes, and then you just pay for your usage. There's no contract and no early termination fee. Go to techsnap.ting.com. For a limited time, we have a $50 promo. They'll give you $50 off your first device, or if you're going to bring a Ting-compatible device, and they have a big GSM and CDMA network, so you might, well, then they give you $50 in service credit. I got $25 in service credit when I signed up, and that more than paid for my first month. So you might find that it's a very, very good value. You can find out by going to techsnap.ting.com and clicking on that savings calculator. I would also recommend, perhaps, take advantage of our discount and get the Netgear Zing. Now, I think right now the Ting site is displaying the $25 discount, but the promo code should get you $50, and you can always double check with their support. But I don't know. Go over there right now and find out. You can check on your, because by the time you're watching this, it's probably already updated since this is a week later. TechSNAP.ting.com. The reason why I suggest that is I love this Netgear Zing. This is a Wi-Fi hotspot with an OLED screen on there that gives you your battery information, your signal information, their settings, all right there on the touchscreen. No contract, and you only pay for what you use. So you just need it from time to time. You turn it on, and you pay for it when you use it. And if you go to TechSNAP.ting.com, they'll take $50 off the price of that Zing, and then it's just a $6 hotspot in your pocket. That's an incredible deal. They've also got devices under $50. Go to techsnap.ting.com and check them out. Also, while you're on their blog, if you're a cord cutter or thinking about cutting the cord, well, Ting has a post about that and why they even care about that. You can find out more at techsnap.ting.com. A big thank you to Ting for sponsoring the TechSNAP program. I'm going to be hitting the road, I think, just after this episode airs, and I'll be loaded up with Ting MiFi devices to make the connectivity happen. So I'll be putting my money where my mouth is for that road trip. And speaking of the road trip, if you'd like to kick in and also follow my progress, patreon.com/today. I just posted a video up there yesterday, but of course this is a video recording ahead of time. But this is something that I posted exclusive for our patrons, and it's just an update on the things before I hit the road and some of the gear and some of the repairs being done. And I'm making available to those of us who support the network over at patreon.com/today. You can become a patron, and your support is appreciated. Alan, with the news all done, that means it's time for the TechSNAP feedback. Thanks for sending your emails to techsnap@jupiterbroadcasting.com or popping that contact link at the top of the JB site, or even better, starting a thread in our subreddit over at techsnap.reddit.com. Our first email comes in from Martin, and he's just reminding us about the Let's Encrypt launch in Q4 2015. He says, Let's Encrypt is a free, automated, and open certificate authority run for the public's benefit. Let's Encrypt is a service provided by the Internet Security Research Group at let'sencrypt.org/about. We haven't talked about this for a while, Alan. What are your thoughts about
Let's Encrypt? Since it was originally announced. Well, I don't know if they've really answered any of the questions we had the first time around.
Yeah, we get a lot of emails about it.
Yeah, and yes, it's an interesting idea, but basically we'll have to wait and see once it actually launches how well executed it is.
Are you concerned that making it too easy is a bad thing?
Maybe a little bit, but I guess not really. Okay. It's not that hard to get an SS certificate now. It's like $5 or $10 in an email. So if I don't have to pay money anymore, I suppose that's useful.
Yeah, yeah. And I think some distros are going to build it in like at a package level, so you can install a Let's Encrypt package.
Wow. Basically, if we get rid of self-signed certificates for all the, it's not important enough, by replacing with Let's Encrypt certificates, it seems like a win to me.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to look at it. Yeah.
The bigger questions is, how are they dealing with revocation? I know Start SSL or whatever that had they gave away free certificates. They were free, but if you wanted to revoke them, that costs money. So it's a bunch of extra work.
Right, I remember that.
How's Let's Encrypt going to deal with that?
Yeah, that always is the piece. All right, then our last and next piece of feedback comes in from El Carbon Del Patron. He says, Hello, Alan and Chris. I have to thank you both for my little adventure in FreeNAS. Because of your show, I bought hardware and started a FreeNAS box here at my home. I'm using 4 3TB RAID Z2, and I can upgrade to 16 hard drives. I'll probably buy a new disk as soon as my pool gets to about 75%, plus or minus.
You probably want to buy a little sooner than that, just FYI.
Yes, trust me. I'm also thinking to add a FreeNAS box to my company also, and I need to get someone to do that since I have no more free time. And I'm not the IT guy. But here's the things I'd like to know. I'm thinking about making all my employees use GPG to sign their emails. But for most of them, using a password every time Thunderbird sends an email is very annoying. I tested with a few of them, but they're always complaining because Thunderbird asks for a passphrase every time they send an email. I was thinking since the GPG key is only for company email and the company computer, I could create all GPG keys in my computer, export each user secret key to a file for each computer, configure, and then configure. But I was thinking for now only to sign emails, at least just signing emails. Since I import myself each secret key to the public key for all other people, and each computer has a Windows 7 and login password, can I place a GPG key in Thunderbird with their secret key, and Thunderbird automatically then signs emails from that computer and client? That way people don't have to type any more passwords into that box, and as each would then be sending a signed email to colleagues and customers. Can you help with this? And thanks for the great show.
Okay. If you're using Ignigmail, the plugin for Thunderbird, there's a setting where the default is remember passphrase for 10 minutes of idle time. You could just change it to 9999, and then you would only ever have to enter the password once a day, I guess. It depends if you actually restart Thunderbird or not. But in general, you can only have to enter it once per session, and then that will be a lot less annoying than having to type it every time.
You got to use an email.
Yeah. But there's other ways to use. There's things called Gbg Agents that will manage your keys for you.
Oh, yeah.
And you can do things where I don't know if you can have one without a password or not. But if you configure one without a password, then that should work too, I suppose.
And then,
but yeah, I like Ignigmail. I find sometimes I use it. Just the key management interface in it is really nice, and I use it just for dealing with all of my GPG keys, even if they have nothing to do with. If I'm not using them for email necessarily, even. Yeah,
Rikai points out in the chat that would be just under a week if he set it to 9999. So there you go. Hey, he had a couple of other kind of semi-questions. He said, I've had a kind of a hard time with FreeNAS. I've gotten CIFS shares and Plex for my little girl's photos and videos, but I can't set up an NFS share, and I cannot set up an OwnCloud server yet.
What? Like setting up an NFS share is the same as the CIFS, except for checking a box.
I bet what it is more on the client connection side. He's having a hard time.
Maybe. And then OwnCloud, I don't know if you're trying to do it manually or what, but yeah, there's like a plugin package where it's like 2 clicks or whatever, and you get an OwnCloud. Whereas if you're trying to set up manually, yeah, it's a lot of work, and he mentions I know how to do it on like Debian and Arch, and like, well,
but that's not how you do it on FreeNAS.
Doing it yourself on FreeNAS. You just get the plugin and it's
you
done.
don't go rooting around in the underline.
You install OwnCloud just like you would install Plex, probably, right? You just click and it's done. Yeah, FreeNAS is meant to be an appliance. You're not meant to dig into it yourself. If you want to do that, then get a regular FreeBSD box and set it up. But it doesn't sound like you're actually interested in that. So yeah, there's a plugin. It works great.
Yeah. And there you go. That's our email for this week.
He says he has more questions, but he'll save them from later. Well,
send them in.
Please write them out, please, because nobody else is bothering. So
email them to TechSNAP@jupiterbroadcasting.com. Use the contact form at the contact page. Or, like you did, the subreddit's great too, TechSNAP.reddit.com. Thank you for sending that in. That's a good question.
Send me questions, please.
And we congratulate you
begging you for questions.
Yes. You, sir, you won the special cookie prize this week. All right. Now, with the feedback all done, that means it's time for the TechSNAP Roundup. Welcome to the TechSNAP Roundup. Yeah, that's what that crazy music means. And all the Roundup stories that just didn't fit at the top of the show, but we still want to give you some links to follow up on your own after the show. Some of these links came from our absolutely incredible and passionate subreddit over at techsnap.reddit.com. And our first story is kind of a funny one. It's from a Hackfest and a new compression algorithm that came out of it, right, Owen?
Yes. Well, the most interesting thing is that the idea came from the TV show.
Oh, okay.
I think it was Silicon Valley, the Amazon TV show.
Yeah, yep.
And they paid a real mathematician or something to come up with a fake compression algorithm for the TV show. Well, a group of 10 engineers at Dropbox at a Hackfest implemented something based on the general idea of that and have actually made something useful.
That's neat.
So they've released Lossless H.264, which is a codec that can compress videos or even JPEG images losslessly, meaning you get back the original quality that you put in.
What?
So this can result in a 22% reduction in the file size of JPEG images without any noticeable loss in image quality.
That's a big deal.
Yeah. Especially with H.264 videos.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, you could, if you have a target size for an episode of TechSNAP, all of a sudden you could get more quality in that same file size.
That's awesome.
Or the same existing quality in a smaller file size.
Oh, I love it. That's a huge deal, and from a Hackfest. Really cool. I wonder if we'll actually see that in production.
Best thing, it's also BSD licensed and it's on GitHub.
Oh, then we just might, actually. All right, how about this one? Comes from TechDirt. China is forcing developers of the Great Wall Great Wall circumvention tools to delete their software. So they're tracking these guys down, going after them like the maintainer of Go Agent. Yeah,
so they're actually busting into their house and threatening them and things, right?
Wow. For making software. How about that avoids... But I'm really confused about this because then I hear there's hotels and they advertise that they have the VPNs. Like when you go to the hotel, they have a hotel-wide VPN so that way you can bypass the Great Wall of China as a Western tourist.
Those are usually more in tourist areas. The Chinese government doesn't care if tourists do it, right? They only care about the citizens.
I guess so. Yeah.
Also, I think that hotel might have been in Hong Kong, and there's a reason why China calls Hong Kong the special administrative region.
Yeah, I think it was.
Because it's the part of China where the Chinese rules don't apply.
All right, so this city-run ISP makes 10 gigabits available to all residents and businesses, and an unrelated story, Chris is moving to Salisbury right now. Because what the hell? 10 gigs? Yes, please.
Yeah, that's a little extreme. Fibrant is what it's called. So the city started it 5 years ago when they realized that AT&T and Comcast, or Time Warner, or whatever the local one was, were not going to invest in the infrastructure for the city, and the city wanted to attract more businesses and residents and so on. So 5 years ago, they started building this, and recently they underwent a project since once you run the fiber is fine. They just had to upgrade the devices at either end to support 10 gigabit.
Yeah.
And so they've made the changes, and currently they're using point-to-point technology. So if you have one of these connections, you just have a direct link point from there back to the thing. But they're looking at switching to this other company who has a thing that allows more of a shared network stuff, so they won't have to run as much fiber.
Yeah, so this is
less setup and so on.
Woo!
But in general, so they have a 10 gigabit connection, but it's $400 a month.
Okay.
Now, they specifically say, we're not expecting most people to get this for the house. This is for businesses. For your house, they have 50 by 50 for $45, which is a lot of upstream for home.
No kidding. Take that.
Honestly, I'd probably rather have 75 by 25 even. But, fiber is fiber, so symmetric is fine. The bigger question is, does the municipality actually have enough bandwidth to serve a bunch of people trying to actually do 10 gigabits?
They actually jumped on there.
Yeah, it's like, I'm opening a data center in somebody's basement in North Carolina. Can I get the 10 gigabits for $400? Because, 1 gigabit cost me more than that. And that's at, wholesale prices.
Mm-hmm. Jeez, 10 gigabits.
I'm sure they have some fair use policies and so on. But anyway, it's interesting to see. And they're not the first place to do it. There was one in Vermont, apparently, that's had 10 gigabits since July.
Yep.
But, 10 gigabits is kind of excessive.
I could use it.
There's a problem. Exactly. Well, the problem is if you're actually trying to use it, then the whole price structure breaks down.
I'd have to upgrade my whole LAN.
Well, yeah, there's that. But the bigger problem is that, they don't actually have the backhaul to support 10 gigabits.
Yeah.
But, they have enough to support one person actually using all 10 gigabits.
Yeah.
But if 5 or 6 of them tried to do it at once, it would be kind of problematic.
Yeah.
But even then,
maybe you still
it's probably a lot better than what you're getting from the current cable company.
You're still getting, exactly.
Sadly, in the meantime, since 5 years ago when this started, North Carolina passed a law stopping municipalities from being able to do this. Although that law is currently being challenged in court and hopefully will be struck down.
Good. You're going to also need to upgrade your Wi-Fi router, and the FCC has something to say about that. There's this proposal going through called the Equipment Authorization and Electronic Labeling for Wireless Devices. And so that brings us to LibraryPlanet.org, who is doing a Save the Wi-Fi campaign. They say right now the FCC is considering a proposal to require manufacturers to lock down computing devices, routers, PCs, and phones to prevent modification if they have a modular wireless radio in them or a device with an electronic label. The rules would likely restrict installation of alternative operating systems on PCs, prevent research to advanced wireless technologies like mesh networking, ban installation of custom firmware on your Android device, discourage the development of alternative and free open source Wi-Fi firmwares like OpenWRT, infringe upon the ability of amateur radio operators to create high-powered mesh networks to assist emergency personnel in a disaster, and prevent resellers from installing firmware on routers, such as those for retail Wi-Fi hotspots or VPNs, without agreeing to any conditioner manufacturer consensus or choices. So they say the FCC is asking for comments on the proposal right now. And so the comment deadline is extended to October 9th, and they have instructions. It's a 3-step instruction program on what to do if you want to make a comment on this proposal. Yeah,
and I definitely think people should. We have the same problem with like software-defined radios and stuff. And it really causes a problem with open source for 2 reasons. Even if a vendor is going to do something, they're using a version of Linux or whatever, they have to get it certified by the FCC, and they would have to get it recertified if they make any changes at all. And that process costs like $200,000 to $400,000. And that's why we see a bunch of routers with really old versions of Linux on them, because that one's already been certified and they can't touch it without having to spend all this money over again. So the current situation is bad enough. The new ones would just be like, no more OpenWRT, no more install FreeBSD on it. And it's just, all of a sudden the vendors who are already not necessarily playing nicely are going to have to actively interfere with you trying to do anything on your router. Yeah. And that's just horrible. And what a mess. What a stupid thing to get people in trouble for. It's a dumb thing to get people in trouble for over, too, because they're just trying to make their own services better. Let's talk about SOAP. Let's talk about clean application compartmentalization with SOAP. SOAP. So this is a research paper, mostly out of the University of Cambridge, about better ways to compartmentalize applications with Capsicum. Very nice, sir. Very nice. Capsicum seems like very cool technology. Yes. You hear about this, I don't know, the Daily Mail is calling it a scandal. Wikipedia blackmail scandal. The website discovers that scammers are charging businesses and celebrities to protect their profiles from fake charges. Like, hey, you want me to protect your Wikipedia profile? Just pay me some money. That kind of thing. Nice reputation you have there. It'd be a shame if something happened to it. Yeah. It's funny that a tabloid-esque place would be covering this because they're one of the people you would expect to be doing it. Right. Or they write the type of thing. Will be the cited reference for something added to one of these Wikipedia pages. But I'm guessing it goes kind of both ways. A, they pay us or we'll write bad things on your Wikipedia page. But also, pay us and we'll auto-revert any changes anybody else makes.
Yeah.
And yes, something Wikipedia will have to deal with more policies.
I think Marriott's probably in trouble if there is a subject on the InfoSec Handler's daily blog called Gift Card from Marriott.
Well, this one actually kind of spins out of control really quickly. So this is a regular phishing scam where they're, claiming, oh, you get a free 3-night stay at a Marriott. Here's a gift card.
Okay.
Click the link or whatever.
Okay.
And it takes you to like a survey with a domain that's been faked. So the domain is actually like luckysurvey.com -- blah 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 .review, one of the new TLDs, which is horrible. And the post goes on and on to complain about the new moronic money grab that is the new TLDs. But then it actually gets to the social survey, Marriott, right? And it's got this, typical clip art of a customer service representative and talking about, what you could win a gift card for this, whatever. It starts asking you questions like, are you male or female, blah, blah, blah. And then at the end, when you select your rewards, nothing to do with Marriott anymore. You can choose
Wow.
Giga Biloba weight loss pills,
Dick pills,
rock hard dick pills, or ripped muscle steroids. So really, it's regular spam.
Yep.
Trying to sell you this crap.
Yep.
But disguised as a survey to get a free gift certificate from Marriott. It's like
they're brand jacking.
Really kind of just but they kind of lost their way. Like at the end of the survey, it should ask you a bunch of stuff to get your personal information to make money off of it. Right? Because that's what you'd expect at the end of the survey. It's like, oh, you've won.
Yeah.
Type in, give us all your personal details so we can send you your gift certificate.
Yeah, we can scam you some more.
But yeah, by the end, they forgot that it was supposed to be about Marriott.
Yes. Yeah, really, they could have at least tried.
Yeah. This is better. I got one today, actually. This one was like a invoice. Where'd it go here? One sec, let me find. Invoice IMV-87163 from Western Digital Inc. for ScaleEngine.com. And it's like, oh, right. I did just RMA some Western Digital drives that had failed, and they were expensive or whatever. And it's like, here's invoice 871 blah blah for so many dollars. The amount outstanding blah is due by September 3rd, 2015, which is today when I get the email. But anyway, please make payment to the following account using your account number or invoice number as a reference, as we no longer accept checks. Federal wire routing number, blah, account number, blah, so on. If you have any questions, please let us know. Many thanks. Cavity Dental Staff Agency Limited.
What? Oh.
They had me going right up to the end where they used the wrong company name.
They lose it. It's just a small detail.
On top of the fact that the invoice attachment was a .zip instead of a PDF or something. And it was post.0 spelled with an x.com. Weird, but...
Yeah, super weird.
So a fairly convincing scheme right up until the end where they blew it.
Yeah. That's true. Let's talk about ad networks. This is something we've touched on quite a bit, and the Register is saying that it's becoming a booming attack vector, and Google and Yahoo are just kind of looking away. Something you've kind of harped on for a while, Alan, is these ad networks, and they have a 6-page write-up on it over at the Register, and they go down like some of the most recent ones, like they say this year it's increased more than 260% over the previous year, with some more than 450,000 malicious ads reported in the first 6 months alone of this year. That's according to Risk IQ.
But they also talked about, part of the problem is actually tracking it down because ads are so personalized and targeted now. If somebody uploads an ad, only very certain people are going to end up seeing that ad. And then it'll be only on certain sites and so on. And so it's very hard to track back which ads were actually the one causing the problem.
Yeah.
Because, it ends up that the people who got infected didn't all visit any of the same websites.
Right.
And so on. So it makes it very hard to figure out which ad network, let alone which ad. And then also the other problem is that you have these like reselling of ads. So the bad guys upload the ad to some small ad network, which then goes and resells the ad into the Google or Yahoo network. And you can have multiple levels of this reselling going on to the point where there's like 4 levels away of the person that actually uploaded the malware to actually where it got published.
Right. That's kind of a mess.
But yes, if you're interested at all in that, it's a good
This plus Google, they're updating Chrome to automatically pause Flash ads, and Apple rolling out ad blocking in iOS 9 by default. Online advertising display ads are going to be having a shakeup for a little while. Hey, we have a review of OpenSSL security, sort of like a look back.
Yes. So the people that maintain OpenSSL have done a blog post. It's interesting. The OpenSSL website actually has a blog now.
Yeah, that is nice.
Up until a couple months ago, it still looked like the typical 1990s open source website.
If you go back and look in previous episodes of TechSNAP, we have screenshots of it from our coverage back then.
It had the same web design it had since like the 90s. But over the last 10 years, OpenSSL has published 100 vulnerabilities. But the important thing here is a graph they have near the end. And you can see that starting partway through 2014, they started classifying vulnerabilities as high, low, or moderate. I'm not sure why they ordered them like that. Anyway, in this graph, they show how long it took between when they announced it and when they had a fix, or when they found out about it and when they had a fix out for it. And so a shorter stack on the graph is better. And then you can see all the red ones were under the 30-day mark. Their average was about 42 days. And they managed to get most of them out before the recommended 60 days by I think it was CERT or somebody that recommends that. And that they never exceeded the 90 days, which is the maximum.
Very nice to see them doing this.
Yeah. And hopefully we can see them trend that average down closer to the 30 days.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's Google's Project Zero that has the 90-day baseline. And CERT recommends 45-day. After 45 days, that the disclosure comes out. And Project Zero says if the vendor's working with them, they're willing to wait up to 90 days.
I am sensing a theme between last week's last roundup story and this week's last roundup story. Alan, tell us about it.
So this one is a search of GitHub.
Yeah.
For basically looking for any file called wp-config, which is a config file for WordPress, and specifically the line that defines the database name. And so this one, you can see, there's data. Oh, that one's just my password.
There's the root user.
But a whole bunch of them,
Change me.
But there's one. Yep, somebody's PHP. Somebody has a database where you can log in as PHP app,
and the user's password.
And the password is just right there.
Yep.
Almost, it's all hexadecimal. Even it's not. It's
look at this one. The user's root. So they're using the root user on the database for their WordPress database. Nice and good. Nice and secure. DB password WordPress. DB user WordPress. DB name WordPress. Not good, people. Ooh, DB name test. DB user root.
Well, here's one where the password's all like Chinese characters.
Ooh, nice. Customer admin. Password is replace.
Yep. Here's one from hidebrute.org. And the password is tilde, open square bracket, BHB, open curly bracket, open round bracket, SJYAC.
Wow.
And so on.
Here's the one that's
really
called. Here's
ones.
one on. Here's one on the Docker project's GitHub page for OpenStack-heat-Docker.
Yeah, that one uses an environment variable to pass a password instead of storing it in the config file.
Yeah, but they're using the root user for the database access.
Yep.
Way to go, Docker folks.
Well, Docker pipes curl into sudo, so what do you expect from that?
Yeah, what else do you expect? Yeah, what else? That's a good one, Alan. I like that.
Here's one. MySQL mover, database password 12345.
Good one. That's a good one. The password crackers will never get that.
Yeah.
Jeez. This is good.
Terrible ones. Another story, related story that I didn't get was if your Amazon keys happen to leak into GitHub, even if you delete them, your Amazon instance is likely to be compromised within 20 minutes. Right. Somebody's just hooked up to the fire hose and just waiting. As soon as they see keys, they jump on it.
That's I guess.
Right? Free computers.
Yeah, exactly. It's free. Yeah, you get a free computer. You just have to watch for somebody to make a mistake on GitHub. Why wouldn't you? I suppose if you want one. All right, that brings us to the end of this show. If you'd like to submit a story or a topic, techsnap.reddit.com is where to go. Some feedback, techsnap@jupiterbroadcasting.com, or use the contact form. We would very much like to hear from you and get your questions into the show. If you'd like to watch us live, go over to jupiterbroadcasting.com/calendar. You'll get our live times automatically converted to your local time zone using the magic of JavaScript. JavaScript, monkeys, and a little bit of love. And then last but not least, don't forget the RSS feeds are available for this show, so you just get it automatically when we release. And you don't have to worry about live or calendars or pre-records or nothing. Just get this show every single week automatically. You can find links to the RSS feeds in the show notes, as well as links to everything Alan's talked about, copious notes, all that good stuff. Just go look for episode 232 of the TechSNAP program posted at jupiterbroadcasting.com. All right. That right there, Alan, brings us to the end of a double marathon recording session. I hope you have a great trip. I'm sure by the time people are watching this, we'll already know that you've had a great trip. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in this week's episode of TechSNAP, and we'll see you right back here next week.